Hi everyone, this is Darren with SimNation. Apologies for not doing a video. I haven't done a video in like 2 months. A lot's been going on in my life. I won't make excuses though. It's eaten up a lot of my time between work, some health issues, and also me standing up a new league here at SimNation that I pretty much had to build from scratch. Um, so I'm going to get back in the swing of doing these videos. Probably you'll see the tutorial videos that some of you have been waiting on. Not this weekend, but next, because I have to travel next weekend. But definitely we'll get more in a cadence of doing these videos. And again, thank you for your patience in waiting for me to drop a video. Want to start with SNCFL because we're about to begin the 2062 season. For SNCFL, this league goes back to 2016. Um, and so this will be like our 46th season. I would say that this is probably one of the oldest leagues out there, and it's has a great core of coaches. So if you're interested in joining us and you like Draft Day Sports College Football 2025, definitely take a look at us. We're on Discord. It's in the links, and we'd love to have you. We have some really good teams, which I'll try to highlight through this video. For those of you who are not aware, last season Louisiana Monroe, who's coached by Skelter, won the championship over Stuart and his UCLA Bruins. This is like I think Skelter's fourth title. I may look at that because I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it's his fourth. Um, so Maryland is, of course, the dominant power within the SNCFL. Louisiana Monroe is another one of those dominant powers. UCLA is probably the team that has won the most, but never won a championship. And then you can see the next dominant is Alabama. This was back in the beginning of the league. There was a coach named Doc. Doc was just probably one of the best online coaches I've ever seen. And he just dominated the league with 9 titles. So Doc was just that good. USC, this was largely Frankie. I'm sorry, this was largely Skelter. So Skelter has a lot more titles than he has at Louisiana Monroe because he won some at USC. He won at ULM. He kind of bounced around until he kind of stayed at ULM. So, of course, they won it last season, though the defending title holder. We'll quickly go through the league. The league starts on Thursday, and there'll be some shakeup this season because some coaches have moved around. The ACC, I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of shakeup here, candidly. In the Atlantic, it's still going to be Florida State versus Clemson. You may see NC State creep into that conversation, but Clemson is coached by Matt. Florida State is a CPU team. NC State, of course, I think is Starfinder, if I remember correctly. Miami's another good open team if you're interested in them, but Duke is Stuart, one of his many teams. And then, of course, you have Virginia Tech, who will enter probably into that conversation, who is Bama. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If I had to guess, probably we'll get a good idea of what this is going to look like in week one because Virginia Tech takes on Alabama. If I remember correctly, Alabama's Invisible Witness, who is a really good pro coach in addition to college, and that game will help determine how good Virginia Tech is. Duke really doesn't play anybody in week one, so we won't get a great picture. Stewart's teams normally are really, really good. We'll talk about the Georgia-Miami game later, but we won't also have a good idea of how good NC State is because Hawaii's not all that good. Same thing with Clemson and Florida State. So if I had to guess, it's going to be Florida State, Clemson, really going for it with the dark horse being NC State. And then on the coastal, it'll be Miami and Duke with Virginia Tech in that race as well. If we move over to AAC, if I remember correctly, DWK I think may be the only coach in this league, and if I get that wrong, don't get mad at me. But largely, Cincinnati should win the East. Central Florida will challenge them along with East Carolina. In the West, it's normally Houston or Memphis. I don't see that changing. DWK gets a pretty easy game against Miami of Ohio. And it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. Cincinnati has put a lot of good players into the pros. So he definitely has the talent. And I just to take a step back, Alabama's DWK, so I did get that wrong. Auburn is invisible witness. Both Alabama teams. So Big 12, there's a shakeup hill, right? Shark is gone at Iowa State. That happened last season. You still have Skelter at Oklahoma State. Originally, I wasn't going to be at Colorado anymore, but I decided to take them back at the last moment just because I put so much effort into them. They were one of my zero to hero teams. I don't think Gary's really active at Oklahoma anymore. BYU, of course, is Starfinder, and then the rest of the teams are all open. Texas is a good team. And really, those are the good teams. So it's going to come down to probably a three-way race with Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Colorado. If Shark was at Iowa State still, I would probably say that he would have the edge. But I think this one's really come down to between Oklahoma State and Colorado. Skelter is the coach at Oklahoma State. Of course, I'm the coach at Colorado. Keep an eye on BYU. This is Starfinder. If he can get a fast start, I think he'll be doing well. Colorado versus Louisiana Lafayette. This is probably one of the games to watch this week, mostly just because Louisiana Lafayette is invisible. Uh, this game would have been one to watch, but Stuart's moved on from Western Michigan, and then of course UCLA, Texas. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Starfinder should get a good win against Buffalo. Oklahoma State's just going to trash Tulane. In the Big Ten, normally this is Maryland's conference to lose. Now the gap has gotten closer and closer, so and there's been some change here as well. Michigan, of course, is Stuart. Maryland is me. Rutgers is Kevin. Ohio State, if I remember correctly, is now Shark. Indiana is Bama. In Penn State is Starfinder. And then I want to say Michigan State is also Michigan State is the only human coach, I mean CPU coach in the East. Every other one of these is actually a human coach, which means that this will be a interesting conference to watch. On the flip side, really the only one that I think is human controlled on the West is going to be Iowa. And if I remember correctly, Iowa is Joe Dorman or Joe Betts. This one is going to come down to Michigan, Maryland, Rutgers. I got to throw Ohio State in there because it's Shark. If he can undo the damage that was done to Ohio State previously, he should be competitive. Penn State and Indiana will factor into the race and make it difficult. There'll be trap games. But it's really these three with the potential of Ohio State that will be the East race. And then in the West, it'll be Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Um, week one, we'll get a good idea maybe of how good Rutgers is. They play Kansas State. Indiana takes on Notre Dame. They should win this one. Ohio State should easily beat Western Kentucky. Um, we'll get a good idea of App State versus Iowa, how good Joe Betts' team is. App State is my former Zero to Hero team who had a really good run last year. Michigan should trash San Jose State. Nebraska, Georgia Tech should be a good game. And then really, if I remember correctly, Maryland's not active in week one, so we won't get a good idea of how good Maryland is this season. And of course, Maryland lost their star quarterback to the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how Early does as the new quarterback there. Conference USA, again, mostly this is CPU, so I'm not going to go through it, but the traditional powers are Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky. Texas San Antonio sometimes plays into it, so does North Texas, but it will really fall between these two teams. In the East, it's really going to be normally Marshall and uh, it's really Marshall most years that wins it, but they had some pretty steep turnover, so keep an eye on James Madison and Old Dominion. Independent wise, we have some new coaches in there. Notre Dame, I've moved on from Notre Dame. They were my Zero to Hero team, but if I remember correctly, Army is Pint of Iris, Pint of Tris, sorry. Sorry about that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out with Army versus Air Force in week one. Air Force is my new Zero to Hero team, of course. And we talked about Indiana versus Notre Dame. I like Bama in this game. He should easily beat Notre Dame. The MAC has had lots of turmoil. Gone is Stuart at Western Michigan. I don't think Western Michigan's going to hold the number 2 rating. Stuart was largely the reason why they were so good. So I have a suspicion that they will see a pretty steep drop off going forward just because Stewart's not there anymore. And then I want to say that that is probably I wonder if Kent State has a coach. Just check that real quick. No. So again, it'll be Western Michigan versus Ball State, Kent State, and probably Ohio. It'll be really Western Michigan versus Kent State. Kent State's been beating Western Michigan, so Kent State will probably win this. In the Mountain West, again, this one, really the only human team out there is Air Force. Um, Air Force is my zero to hero team, so we'll see how well they do. They're in a pretty bad division of the Mountain West. Boise State and Colorado State typically are the two fighting for this, and one of them is almost always fighting to be in the playoffs. So we'll see how well they do. I'm not confident with Air Force. I didn't have a great recruiting season with them, so we'll see how that plays out. Over here, it's typically UNLV, Nevada, and Texas Christian, with a nod to UNLV because I think they have the better team. In the Pac-12, this one's interesting to me. Cal has been doing really well in the Pac-12, mostly because that's Bama. I had Oregon last season. I'll have Washington this season. Don't look for Washington to make a lot of noise. The team's not very good. I'm going to hold on to them for a few seasons and see if I can't build them up. But really, it's going to be Washington State, Stanford, and Cal fighting for the North. And whoever wins the North is going to be the token gesture to UCLA in the South. This is Stuart. He pretty much owns the Pac-12 at this point. If Brian was still at USC, I would say that there's a good chance that someone could upset him and get past. And there were a few upsets last year with him. But really, Arizona State is the only person who may get in his way with this is Wabia. He may be able to trip him up, but look for UCLA to win the Pac-12. And likely it'll be Bama versus UCLA in that one. In the Southeastern, this one is probably a lot more competitive than most. I mentioned DWK earlier at Alabama. You have Invisible at Auburn. You have the defending champion, Louisiana Monroe, which is Skelter. It's largely going to be a race between those three teams. Bama, Auburn, and Louisiana Monroe. And really, it's going to be a race between these two teams. It'll probably go late into the season before we find out who wins. Louisiana Monroe had some turnover, but Auburn, I think Auburn may have it a little bit, but Invisible Witness has been creeping up on them for a while now, and we'll see if Skelter can hold them off. On the flip side, Georgia is pretty much the undisputed power in the East, and this is Shark. He'll get challenged by Soa, who's at Florida, in Tennessee, who's Udo. Udo has strong starts and then he tends to taper off, but we'll see if he'll be able to put together a pretty good season. He's got a good team, but I don't see anyone really unseating Georgia in the East. And so it'll be Georgia versus either Louisiana Monroe or Auburn. And of course, Shark will want to defend making a deep run and getting back to where he was before. Sunbelt, there's been a lot more competition in the Sunbelt because there are now more coaches in the Sunbelt than there were before. You have Appalachian State, who's one of my teams. You have Shark at Coastal Carolina. You have Invisible at Louisiana Lafayette. And if I remember correctly, you have DWK at Georgia Southern, and you have Stuart at Georgia State. So this is going to make for a very, very, very competitive Sunbelt. Last year, Coastal won it. App State probably made the biggest run into the playoffs. They made it to the semifinals. But it'll largely be between Coastal, Louisiana Lafayette, and App State. Just keep an eye on Georgia State, though, and Georgia Southern can factor in. But I think at the end of the day, what you're going to see is one of these three teams is going to win it. And the hope is that one of them will make a deep run into the playoffs. Coastal's more like an ACC team. App State just had a great run last year. From a the hero perspective, they were undefeated, I think, until the championship game, and then they lost, and then they made a deep run into the playoffs to the semifinals before they got trashed, and just had a really good season. So they're the only second zero to hero team I've ever had that's actually made a deep run. Too early to tell who will win the national championship, but some of the stories will be what's life look like for Maryland without Herman? How good is Louisiana Monroe going to be again this season? They have a lot back, so I think that they would be my natural choice to potentially be the team that wins it. Can UCLA finally get their title? Stuart's been knocking on that door for a while. Can Michigan finally end Maryland's streak in the Big Ten? And what's going to happen with Auburn with Invisible Witness? He's really built that program up. Can Georgia get their first championship? And that's something where Shark has also been knocking on the door. How good is Duke going to be this year? Stewart's really built them into a power, but is this the year where Matt starts to climb back up to the top? Matt being a coach who has won titles before. And then how's Coastal Carolina gonna play out with now having competition in the Sun Belt? I still think that they are the best team in the Sun Belt. And then what we'll see is, can Kevin put together a season to remember at Rutgers? He's been knocking on that door for a while now, and he's really close. So I do think that he potentially could do that. And then for Air Force's perspective, can they make it to the playoffs? I'm probably going to go out on a limb and say no. Um, I can normally tell when coming out of recruiting if I have a good team or not. The problem with Air Force is going to be they're going to have probably a really good defense. They're going to have a really bad offense because I did not get a good quarterback despite trying. But it'll be an interesting season. If you want to join us, the links are in the video. Looking forward to it, but I'll just go out on a limb right now and kind of just say that my gut tells me that the championship final will be UCLA versus Georgia, and one of the two coaches who haven't won will get the first championship. That's it for now. Thank you for your time. Hope you like this video, and let me know if there's any other videos you want me to do.